Hold up. Are we yet again seeing cameras selling real life fake love between celeb couples? Why are the crowds laughing and singing like some goddamn annoying preset template? Why is this puppet child some metaphor and not a human protagonist we could probably at least relate to? All of this feels so pretentious. We are all quintessentially confused by Annette, and many of us are weirded out by this doll protagonist who looks like she got in the wrong film. Could be a great cast for some creepy horror blockbuster. Not gonna lie, this film is definitely macabre,
Miracles do exist.
but it's weird, it's a
Without
goddamn
further
divisive musical.
ado, I introduce to you
The pretentiousness of the world within this film is like a double edged sword. When everyone sings along, you don't know whether the characters are expressing vulnerability, genuine humanity, or fake performativity. But if you ask Friedrich Nietzsche what the meaning of it all is, he'll tell you, unless he's triggered by the existence of a female doll protagonist, and I sure do hope that's not the case. Friedrich Nietzsche was a 19th century German philosopher, famous to have brought to light the apparent downfall of the conventional Christian thought that governed lifestyle of people in the West. While he never saw fame in his lifetime, his works amassed massive popularity decades after his death, including some terrible Nazi misinterpretations. But perhaps the greatest triumph of Nietzsche's thought was his predictions about modern life, having an uncanny similarity with the world we live in today. In his most popular work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche observed the sum of humanity as domesticated folk, following the norms of collective society pretty blindly. And Annette provides a fitting atmosphere in this setting. The collective audiences express an overwhelming chorus throughout the film, like a herd of cattle acting in the same ways, part of a vicious cycle of culture, one that Nietzsche sought to criticize. We slowly realize that Annette's world is also a tale of extreme opposites. On one hand, we get a sacred spirit aspiring to be God, Anne, an opera performer whose grace of dying on stage captivates the attention of everyone. But on the other hand, we have Henry McHenry, the ape of God, the devil anarchist comedian who wreaks havoc on stage. The differences beautifully manifest in the film, in their art forms. This is constantly hinted in the beginning. We eventually see how outside manifests in the form of Henry breaking the fourth wall as a stand up comedian and facing the real world, and within manifests in Anne entering a forest as the first wall of the stage breaks to show depth, her struggles with the search of a moonlight within her. Henry speaks with low toned free verse. He enjoys the chaos he inflicts in his cheap acts. Anne sings in prominent high tones, mirroring sacred virtues as she bows down with great austerity. Henry alienates his audiences, Anne attracts their attention. Henry practices the form of descent into the world, becoming devil, but Anne transcends in her visions, becoming God. The story begins with a presentation of an exceedingly intriguing premise: the attraction of the ape of God with the spirit of God. Both souls meet as they sing on similar notes. Henry starts singing soft high tones, and Anne meets him by toning her notes down. Here we see how the world uncovers itself. Henry praises Anne, but at the same time, he talks about his attraction to the abyss in his stand up shows. The scenes grow into the ultimate act of union, sexual intercourse between Henry and Anne, as the entire scene expands into celebrity tabloid buzz. The union gives way to several angles. As Anne goes deeper into the forest in her performance, she develops a sense of paranoia towards Henry McHenry, who gazes at her with intense jealousy. The man in green and red enters the charming yellows and blues of Anne. His nightmare jokes represent his tendencies towards silent evil, as Anne's nightmares reflect the threat to her purity. The birth of Annette happens in a hospital room full of a mix of blue and green, giving rise to the baby. In Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, childbirth is again the center of the story. The child, Zarathustra says, is a self propelling wheel, a sacred yes. In the child, the spirit now wills its own will. As a being yet to be formed, the child is viewed as a puppet doll in the eyes of the parents and the world, eliciting feelings of objectification from a man like Henry and feelings of love and aesthetic purity from a person like Anne. But in this chapter, we are introduced to yet another unformed being, the conductor, who self deprecates himself due to his position as a mere accompanist. After the birth of Annette, Henry's pure love dies and morphs into pure evil. In his performances, he finds himself literally assuming the role of ape of God as he apes Anne. Instead of going with a stand-up performance, he forces himself into acting out a troubling personal incident between him and his wife, his desire to kill her out of the sickness of love. Therefore, we see how he tries to create a third-person narrative instead of speaking directly with his audience. But the audience hates him for his expression. Henry gives in to his dark side by finally crossing the line and throwing a microphone towards the audience in his loudest sign of breaking the fourth wall. Instead of showing concern towards his mental state, the audience gives in to the massy disdain they have been programmed to. This is the horrible abyss that the film portrays in today's world as tensions escalate. The intensification of tensions leads the family into a cruise ship where difficult times strike. By now, the chaos of Henry turns into organized crescendos of evil in the background music. His drunk state turns him into an unshakable force of evil as he vaults Anne to death and does nothing to save her. This reflects Nietzsche's passions, as he famously proclaimed the death of God and our guilt in killing him. It also reflects Anne's inability to die as a performer in the large scheme of opera, like how Christ has in the Bible, generating inspiration for people for centuries. The tone of the setting finally turns dark. The youthful blues of Anne darken, and Henry's sight of the stars turn out to be false. Suddenly, a witch with the face of Anne appears, pledging revenge against Henry. This amplifies the lack of God as baby Annette has no one to look out for her anymore. After the death of Anne, Henry tries to pose himself as a great father. He tries to become graceful at the act by buying Annette a gift of night lights with shapes of moons and stars. It's a very sly callback to Anne desiring moonlight and starlight. On the other end, the conductor is finally unleashed into true potential. He now sees himself as the glorious leader in one inspiring long shot while he exudes emotions through monologue. The film now poses the question of the Übermensch, a transcendental figure brought to light by Nietzsche. According to him, Übermensch was a figure who reflected the ideal qualities of man on earth and rose from the herd humanity of the times. Both Henry and the conductor pose themselves as potential Übermensch. Unlike our perspective, in Nietzsche's perspective, Henry actually qualifies on paper because his performances defy the collective. He becomes a larger than life figure in the grand scheme of things, and in the public's eye, he also dies and makes a rebirth as a father of Annette. On the other hand, the conductor becomes a potential Übermensch because he sincerely cares for Annette. In a way, he is Zarathustra, for he knows what is right and what is wrong. He signals his criticism of Henry when Henry proposes using Annette as singer across the world. However, both eventually fail in Nietzsche's books. The conductor is a naive, benevolent figure who allows Henry to exploit Annette, even serving Henry's cause. When he angers Henry for teaching her Henry and Anne's love song, we realize that he was indeed the genius behind the song and Annette's father, but he never raised a finger against Henry. It is due to his lack of individual power that Henry overcomes him. On the other hand, for all the displays of good father, Henry always only cared about his appeal to people. According to Nietzsche's morality, man can either be master or slave in this world. And while the conductor became slave to Henry, Henry became a slave to the masses. He just wanted to feel lovable by people around him. And even after the conductor reveals that he may not be the father, Henry is more concerned about what people will think instead of the reality. As the prodigy, Annette, rises, she becomes a performer just like her father, mother, and the conductor, and she finds herself in the same place, the vicious circle of social media popularity. But she also witnesses the downfall of both Henry and the conductor. She becomes a witness to the death of God. During her final performance, she is expected to perform the same way again. But Annette finally defies the slave morality and confesses about her father's crimes. This final nail to Henry's coffin also manifests as what Nietzsche calls the will to power. The child hence born out of the god and the devil escapes the collective herd mentality of the world to will power for herself. Director Leos Carax is definitely inspired by Nietzsche, but he's not blinded by him. Perhaps out of the knowledge of Nietzsche's open intellectual misogyny manifested in his books, especially Thus spoke Zarathustra. Carax's Ubermensch is Annette, a small girl. The final scene of this film becomes one of the most touching conclusions I have personally experienced. Henry, now in jail for all his sins, asks for forgiveness and love from his doll daughter, but comes to the grand realization that the doll has finally turned into a human. Annette finally becomes herself. She rejects Henry and, on top of everything, vows not to sing again. Henry hugs her, but she makes her stance clear. Out of the dilemma of whether to forgive her parents or not, she prefers to leave behind the doll she was to them and finally assert herself. This makes Annette an enduring, powerful hero. What doesn't kill her makes her stronger.